Hello, everyone, and welcome to this Bloom webinar. It takes a while for uh, everyone to come on in. Well, let's get going. I'm Alexander, the founder of Bloom. We supply vetted and experienced charity freelancers for interim, part-time, and project work. And if you want to find out what this means in practice, then you can sign up for our demo next week. Details will be on the email that follows this event. Bit of admin before we begin. Please keep yourselves on mute throughout the webinar. If you have any questions or comments, then write them in the chat box and we will do our best to feed them into the conversation. This is being recorded, so please don't share anything you wouldn't be happy sharing with a wider audience. Thank you to those of you who have already submitted questions. I've shared them with Sarah and Mary Rose, so hopefully we will get around to covering those. On to the substance. Mary Rose is the founder and chief exec of the Fore, which since 2017 has awarded £12.5 million in 650 unrestricted grants to small charities and social enterprise. And Sarah is the head of innovation at the National Lottery Community Fund. And so, as you can imagine, spends a decent part of her time working out how the fund should respond to AI. They will be covering three broad topics. First, what do they see happening now? Second, what are they doing? And third, how they think AI will affect grant giving in the future. So let's get going. Sarah, starting with you, in what ways have you seen AI affecting the bids that the community fund is receiving?
Hi, Alexander. Hi, everyone. I'm really excited to be here. But I'm going to answer your first question by saying I can't actually tell you, which may be the best way to start. But one of our challenges is we don't know how many people are using AI to write bids because we can only spot those that have used AI really badly. Because if somebody's using it well, it just feels like it's been written by them. Whereas if somebody isn't, that's when we can spot it. So we don't really know how many are coming to us through that AI route. We do know that there's been an increase in the number of applications. Excuse me. Not sure how many of those are due to AI, how many are just because there's an obvious increased need in the sector. So you would expect the volume to increase. But also because the highest volume of our grants go to smaller organisations, smaller charities, we're aware that many of those organisations haven't necessarily started their AI journey yet, potentially a bit of a divide there between the larger and smaller charities, a bit of a concern. But it may also be because the bulk of our customers are not really in that AI space so much. A bit of a generalisation there, I know. But I think even though we've seen an increase in applications, we're not actually seeing that many that are directly asking for support around developing AI themselves. That might be the nature of what we do. We're a community funder, so people come to us looking for support to be delivering really wonderful, impactful projects in their community. Perhaps people are less aware that they can apply for that type of thing from us. But I think from our perspective, it's important to consider two areas. I think, firstly, that it's really easy because there's such a lot of narrative around AI at the moment to be like, oh my gosh, we should be using AI. We need to use AI for something, and seeing it as a solution and then trying to find a problem that fits that solution. Whereas obviously you want to start from your problem space because there's lots of different digital tech solutions which aren't AI that actually can work really well. So it's really easy to jump on the AI bandwagon without it actually being the right solution. And we've also started talking, I think, to groups a little bit about how it's not just about how you use it internally. It's also considering how your beneficiaries are starting to use it, how it changes their approaches, and consequently what that means for you and your mission, and how you might have to adapt your offering, what you do, to make sure that it still fits with the way that people are changing their lifestyles around AI as well. So I'm starting off by kind of not giving you an answer, but hopefully that perspective is useful.
Really. So, Mary Rose, do you have an absolutely definitive answer on this question?
The question of what we're seeing, I think it doesn't make a huge difference to us. The quality of the applications that we are seeing has probably improved a little bit, which is great. But I think generally it doesn't, because of the nature of our process, which is the first stage is a very short expression of interest type request that we're looking for. We hope people are using it and therefore saving themselves time. And generally, I think the small charity sector has been incredibly nimble and incredibly creative in how it is using it. And that's definitely what we're hearing from other funders, is that the small charity sector is actually outgunning them with AI. And the funders are, and this is something that doesn't affect us because of the way that our process works, and we limit the number of applications that we take on each of our funding rounds. But for other funders that don't limit the application numbers, what we're hearing on the ground is that they are inundated and they are really struggling to cope with the demand, because the small charity sector has been so clever at working out what are the tools that it can use to, write 10 applications a month, whereas before they were only able to write one. So what I think the definitive answer to what we're seeing is it's not making a huge difference for us, but for others that we're talking to, they're struggling. The funders are struggling to cope.
And Sarah, when you do see bids that you suspect have had AI input, is there any particular protocol or reaction that people take when they're reviewing those bids?
Yeah, I mean, and we've been very open from the start that actually we are very comfortable with people using AI to write their applications. We know it's, if you're a volunteer writing, it saves you time. If English isn't your first language, it really supports you. If you have a neurodiversity, then that actually can really help you bring your thoughts together in the structure of an application form. So we're very comfortable with people using AI. And one of the challenges is if people use AI to write the application for them, what that application is then missing is the real story of their group, of their community, of the thing that they want to do. So when we say, we can spot the ones that are badly written, it's because they don't tell that story. Because no AI, that if it's wholly writing that application for you, will be able to capture that passion, that enthusiasm, the real grit of why you're doing what you're doing. And so when people are using it in that way, it's difficult for us to approve those applications because they don't stack up. They don't have the strength that applications that have had somebody write it or have had a lot more human input. So what we tend to say is it's a brilliant tool to start you off. It's a brilliant tool to go, okay, here's your first draft, but never submit that first draft as your final application because that's what's missing from it. But use it as a first draft. It will get you going. Then include your own stories, the things that matter to you, why your community is important, why you want to be delivering what you're delivering. And that builds that story for us to be able to go, yes, we understand what you're trying to do. We understand why it's important, and helps us then approve that application. But then also maybe use it as a critical friend. So when you've written it, you've used it as a starting point, you've written the rest, use it as a critical friend. Say, what do you think of this? What could we change? What could we add value to? What could we improve?
What's your perspective on that, Mary Rose? What do you when you see bids that you think have had AI influence, do you have a particular response or process in responding to them?
I think we don't, as Sarah said, the good ones, it's really hard to tell, and that's how it should be. But I think I would say something slightly counter to what Sarah's just said. And I would say, try not to use it as your first draft, use it to critique what you have already written or to shape other bid. So, because I think what can happen, certainly, this is from personal experience, when I use AI, I sort of think, oh, it sounds so much cleverer when AI writes it than it does when I write it. But actually, it takes the soul out of it. So I think using it, take something that you've written for, an application that you wrote for something else before AI existed, and say, look, they use as much of the wording that I have used, but please, can you use this information to answer these questions? So you can, AI is only as good as you are at prompting it, basically. And so I think if you try and get it to use your language, because actually, the thing it's very good at making things sound is extremely generic. I was getting it to help me with writing a job description the other day, and actually, the more I was using it to say, oh, do you want me to make this a bit shorter? And do you want me? And the more I said, oh, actually, yes, it's still too long. I ended up with something so bland, but it's in very technical, kind of impressive language. So my kind of instinctive reaction to it was, oh, this is so much better than what I had written. But actually, it was something that it could have been a job description for any charity in the whole of the UK, essentially. And I think that is where you have to be really careful, is that you don't feel like it's made you sound really good by using sort of jargon words, when actually it means that you've become, this is where I completely agree with Sarah, you've become one charity. It's almost impossible to see who you are from.
And finally, bit, Sarah was saying they haven't seen many, on the other side of the coin, many charities asking for support to fund AI activity or a use of AI. Are you seeing much? Would you want to see more?
We see a lot of applications, and we fund a lot of tech support solutions. So a lot of the people, our funding is unrestricted, but people tell us why they'd like what they'd like to invest in, basically, with the funds that we're giving them. And we do fund quite a lot of organizations that want to upskill and improve their tech. So CRM systems, for example, for volunteer management, beneficiary management, all of the different things that are needed, help with impact management. And where it is, it basically comes back to, from our perspective, what is right for you as an organization. We want to know if you realize that actually having an AI integrated solution into your business model as a charity will make a massive difference and enable you to do double the amount of work, then absolutely apply for it. But I think those situations are quite few and far between, probably, in the small charity sector. Most people need more money to pay for staff and to pay for just what they're doing. And there's so much available from an AI perspective that's free. I think, massive businesses are struggling to work out how it can really help them. So I don't feel any pressure, I think, small charity sector to suddenly say, oh, AI is going to do our jobs for us, because it really isn't.
So coming on to how you're using AI within the community fund, how are you using it, either in the grant making process and indeed beyond?
Yeah, so we're not currently using AI in any part of our kind of grant making, decision making process. And we've got no kind of short-term plans to be doing that. But what we have done internally, I think, when we first started our own AI journey about 2 years ago, it came to my team as the innovation unit, but none of us were experts even in tech and digital, let alone AI. So we kind of stepped into the space not knowing anything, which I think was really, in a way, was really helpful and useful, because we were taking the same journey as everybody else. So the first thing that we did was establish a set of principles by which organizationally every use of AI we considered had to fit within those principles. So they've been kind of our guardrails, and have ring-fenced our journey as we've moved ahead, and were really important to us. And out of them fell a use policy for our staff. So we've been experimenting a little bit with full co-pilot licenses to help us build agents. When I say agents, it sounds very fancy, but it's essentially just having a really good prompt that will repeatedly do a task for you. A bit like programming, but without needing the code, just using language, which has been really easy. Some of those have been very successful. We've piloted a text summarization tool, which has been really good for our comms team, because it will take text from applications and turn them into something that's easy for them to manage and promote and support those organizations that have been funded. And we have a policy that enables our staff to use it. I have to say, we have the full spectrum. We have some people like me that use it more or less every day. We have other people that aren't using it and are choosing not to use it, and everything in between. So it's kind of actively used in the organization, but we're not using it with any of our grant decision making.
Interesting, yeah. And you, Mary Rose?
We use it a lot, but not with the grant decision making as well. I think so our process is the organizations submit a 3-page document, and it's not a form that they're responding to. We just suggest that they put certain bits of information into it in their own words. So obviously it's very easy to use AI to help you do that if you want to, and we encourage it if it saves time. But then from that, organizations get invited to have a meeting with one of our consultants, and obviously a face-to-face meeting, you can't, well, I mean, theoretically, you could probably have an AI robot, but we are never, ever going to do that. And then the consultants are the ones that write up the final funding application that goes to a panel. And we have, it's very participatory. So we have our leaders of our charities that are in our portfolio sit on the panels alongside trained corporate volunteers. So it doesn't really lend itself to having AI involved. At some point, we did explore before, and AI wasn't good enough, but that was 18 months ago, 2 years ago, and obviously it's come on enormously since then. Whether it could help us with sifting the initial application documents that we receive from charities, AI isn't very good at counting still in a lot of instances. And when you're trying to compare very different bits of information across applications, I'm not sure I think it'll be a while before AI is good enough to do that and help us. And if we ever do use it, we will bring it in alongside humans, and until it's creating better results than our humans are, we will absolutely not transfer over to it. But we would never lose that face-to-face element. So yes, we will over time consider looking at it, but yeah, we're not doing it. And then in the rest of the organization, obviously, like everybody is, we're using it where it's helpful, and trying to save time with it.
And Sarah, across the sector as a whole, of the trust and foundation sector, I mean, how preoccupying an issue do you sense this is within trusts and foundations? And are there any examples you're aware of? You get some trust foundations saying, we will not accept any AI bids. Others take different approaches. Any sort of variations in the approaches you're seeing across the sector?
Yeah, and I mean, I think there are, trusts and foundations which are clearly saying we don't want applications we don't want AI to be used for our applications. I think there's a number of them that are just asking the question, like, have you used AI to support the writing of this application or not? So they're getting an idea of how many are coming in with the use of AI, but it's not being used as part of the assessment. It's just, let's understand a little bit what's happening in the sector. And others like us, I think, that are not necessarily encouraging it, but actually saying, we're very open to applications being written that way. So I think it's a real mix still.
Have you seen anything, Mary Rose, in other trusts and foundations that interests you?
I think that people are quite overwhelmed, I think, by it. And I think the trust and foundation sector it's quite traditional, and it's not known for moving fast, I think, with change and innovation generally. So I think that, as I said before, the small charity sector is sort of way ahead of it. Was reading a really interesting article about how similar in the job market, in that the recruiters and the businesses that are recruiting are sort of overwhelmed by the fact that individual people who are applying for jobs can now very quickly work out how to use AI to do multiple job applications. But if you're a business, you have to completely redo your HR system to change from getting 50 applications for a job to if you're getting 500, and it takes so much longer for their systems to change as opposed to the individuals applying. And I think it's exactly the same in this applying for grant sector, is that it will take a long time for the trusts and foundations to catch up. And I'm afraid I'm really worried, because I think that in short term, it is going to not be hugely positive for the trust and foundation space, because if they are overwhelmed with applications and they don't have the time and the capacity to review them, it is quite likely that they will either, and we are seeing it, I think it's fair to say happening already, start making their criteria narrower, start being more restrictive, start going back to funding people that they know already. So I think in the short term, it's quite likely to not be good for the small charity sector, but things are changing so fast. I don't know where. I mean, I think obviously nobody knows where it's going, but I'm disappointed. What we are doing, us as an organization, is we have spare due diligence capacity, and we are going out to as many trusts and foundations as we can and saying to them, look, we can help. If you're overwhelmed, we can help if you work with us. But again, the trust and foundation sector is quite traditional and takes a long time to make decisions. So none of this is going to happen fast, but we are having some interesting conversations with funders who are struggling.
Well, I suppose that leads us onto the future. So how do you see AI changing the grant giving process in the future? And also, do you recognise some of the strains that Mary Rose was talking about, some of those pressures on funders?
Yeah, I mean, as I say, that we're seeing an increase in applications, and that's across the board, and part of that is the increase in need, as well as people's use of AI to be able to write multiple applications. I mean, I think one of our concerns is that I think a bit contrary to that we see in a lot of the digital AI skills surveys that it's actually the smaller organisations that are less likely to be adopting AI than the larger ones. So one of the things we're very aware of is the potential for disadvantage when it comes to being in a position to write multiple applications. We have a small responsive grant where we have a high volume of applications through, and we continue to look at how we might be able to simplify that to make it easier for those. Sorry to
interrupt. Can you give an example? What scale of increase roughly have you seen in the last year or two in applications?
I know. I'd say over the last year or two, we've probably seen about a 20%, 25% increase, which we are still able to manage. But one of the things when we're looking at the future, working in innovation, I have the joy of being able to consider the future every day. Yes. And one of the possible futures we're considering is, if we get to a space where AI is being used to write applications, and trusts and foundations are starting to use AI to assess applications, then we're sort of in a position where a traditional application process just becomes obsolete because AI is checking its own homework, and without a human in the loop, how do you know realistically what the money is being distributed for? So the first thought is, well, how else can people apply? What other systems can you put in place for people to apply through? But I think probably the more interesting question is, how else could we distribute funds? So what could we do to get the money out there that doesn't involve an application form? And is there a way that collectively funders can work together, can use their data to better understand what's working in different thematic areas of the sector? Can we use AI to help us understand what organisations are doing out there, what they're delivering on the ground? And could we actually reach some, I was referred to it as a little bit of a nirvana state, but reaching that nirvana state where funders are actually able to approach organisations and say, actually, we think this type of work could be incredibly beneficial. We think this is something that you might be interested in delivering. Can we work together to scope this out? So it becomes a more proactive relationship from funders rather than reactive space that we tend to be in at the moment. That's a very long way off, but those are the sorts of questions that we're starting to ask ourselves as a funder as well, is how do we flip that and start looking at our distribution methods rather than looking at the application methods.
Really, really interesting. Yeah. So what about you, Mary Rose?
I think that, it's very hard to know what's going to happen. I'm a bit nervous about what Sarah said about funders asking organisations to deliver projects. We've very much come from it from the other angle, of saying we want to ask charities and social enterprises what's needed. What are you doing? Why is it important? And how can we support that better and with more activity, whether it's funding or non-financial support. So I really love what Sarah said about the potential that this would mean that you wouldn't need application processes because funders would go out there. But I hope that most of them will go out there saying, we want to learn from you what's needed, potentially set up priorities ourselves, saying, you know, we're really interested in the homelessness space, or we're interested in mental health. You're doing something really interesting in that space. Let us support you. That, I agree, would be a nirvana, as long as the funders don't get too prescriptive about what they want to see, and they listen to what is needed on the ground. I think that in terms of funders working together more, yes, that would be great. I mean, everybody has wanted them to do that forever, certainly since I've been in this sector, which is probably now nearly 20 years. So that would be good. Whether funders will start to use AI to assess applications, I think they definitely will. But again, it'll take them quite a while to get there. And in the meantime, I mean, advice, there, you know, I wish we had silver bullet advice, but we don't. And I think, you know, the system of what Sarah mentioned about the sort of larger organizations are potentially better at using AI than the really small ones. Yeah, I mean, but that's exactly the same situation with fundraising generally, and the larger organizations are more likely to have money to spend on fundraisers. So they were better at navigating the old systems, and had massive advantages over the smaller. So, you know, that sort of ça change from that perspective, which is really tough for smaller organizations, because once again, they are left in a really tough place. I think it's going to be very interesting when the NCVO publish. They delayed publishing their almanac last year. I don't know if anyone else noticed that. And they've said they're going to publish it, I think, early in 2026. But the data in the previous year's almanac about the amount of money going to small organizations was pretty scary, in that it's sort of going off a cliff, the line on the graph. And I have a nasty feeling that that is not going to have changed in the last year. So small organizations are really struggling to get a hold of funding. What advice would we give generally? I think you have to, but this is really tough because it takes time. Try and make sure you've got a really good website, your marketing, you know, make sure your presence on LinkedIn is there. You're talking about what you're doing. As a small charity, use 360 giving to look at who is funding charities that are working in the same areas as you. So you can, if you are going to target funders, and try and kind of make contact with them, you know, follow them on LinkedIn, try and connect with them, that sort of thing, before you send in applications. You are going for the people who are most likely to support the work that you're doing, and, you know, build your networks where you can. But again, I am very aware that all of these things take time, and time is what small charities just don't have, particularly when you're inundated with demand, as most are at the moment.
Yeah, could I just jump in and just quickly clarify that my vision of the future is definitely not one of a funder that commissions or a funder that prescribes what people are doing. As the fund, you know, we always talk about it starts with community, and we genuinely and honestly mean that. So this would just be a process by which we could proactively approach people rather than wanting them to respond reactively to us.
Well, thank you. And Mary, thank you for those practical bits of advice for small charities. That was going to be my final question.
Sorry.
No, brilliant. So it gives the last word to Sarah on that. What would your advice be to a small charity as to how they take a proportionate view of adopting AI and investing in it? What's the right thing to do at the moment, in your view?
Yeah, I mean, I think it loops back to the original answer. Is in a way, it's like it is a great solution, but it's not the solution for everything. So start from what your challenges, your problems are, and then work from there. And if it ends up that AI is a solution to that, then that's absolutely brilliant. Completely agree with Mary Rose that the more kind of networks that you can create, the more you're embedded in the sector. It means that shared opportunities for solutions surface as well, and it's really interesting to explore, I think, what they might be. And making sure that when you're thinking about AI, you're not just thinking about it as a tool for you, but you are thinking about what its impact will be in wider communities, in the broader sector, to make sure you're responding to that through your missions, through your objectives, through thinking about how your beneficiaries might be impacted by their own use of AI and the use of AI around them. And I think feel courageous, feel comfortable, feel able to step into those spaces and explore, recognizing that there aren't really any AI experts around. It's all coming from practice and from experience, and finding those networks where people are sharing the types of things that they've tried and maybe haven't worked, or tried and have worked. So we're collectively learning as a sector rather than individual charities learning on their own.
Thank you. Thank you so much. We're going to have to draw things to an end there. The bad news is I'm very aware we've left a lot unanswered, not least about the ethics of AI. But the good news is that the conversation can continue on LinkedIn. The link will appear in the email that you'll get immediately. And the really good news is that Mary Rose and Sarah have agreed to review any burning points or questions that emerge during that discussion, and we will feed back responses they may have, though not immediately on that. So just remains me to say thank you all so much for coming and participating, and a particular thanks, of course, to Mary, Rose and Sarah. It's incredibly valuable for charities to have the opportunity to get a peek under the bonnet of the funders. So very grateful that you were able to give us that today so openly and constructively. Thank you. You'll all shortly receive an email with links to the LinkedIn discussion, as well as the registration page for the Bloom demo I talked about earlier. Places are limited to 20, so sign up quickly if you want to find out how to find and hire great freelancers. And on Monday, we will send you a recording of today's webinar. So thank you again for coming, and I hope we see you soon, particularly if you need any freelance support. So goodbye.